Hi everyone, it's Jeanette here from the Sewing Studio with, it's not really a request, but I was reading the comments from when we did the pineapple block, and I did it with a trim tool. I bought myself the trim tool for Christmas so that I could use my scraps, not have to really worry about what size they were, and make these blocks. And I'm doing them from all my scraps. It's my year of the scraps, so I'm doing all these scrappy projects. And I was reading the comments, and quite a few people said they either didn't have the trim tool, or I know there was one lady from South Africa that said you would not believe how much it would cost her to get one of those trim tools to be delivered to her in South Africa. Is there any way you can do it with a normal ruler? And the answer is yes, there is. So that's what I thought I would show you today. Now I've done it and I've worked out the sizes. So this is going to make the exact same blocks as I was making with the trim tool, but we're just going to be doing it with a normal ruler, our rotary cutter, and our scraps of fabric. But the one difference is we have to cut our scraps of fabric to size first. All our strips for the background and for our colours need to be cut to 1.5 inches for this to work out at the same size. Our centre square is the same at 2.5 inches. So as I said, we're going to start once again with my 2.5 inch square. Now I'm using black in the centre of all of mine. I just think it's a colour that's going to work quite well with the 4 colours that I'm using in that block. Now we'll put a link to the description to the other tutorial where I use the trim tool, because I talk about the blocks a little bit more in detail. But one of the things I found when I was making my initial blocks was I made one block where the colours were in a different order. And then I thought, actually, it's probably going to give me more flexibility if I keep the colours in order. So I'm going to keep that one there to reference. And also that's a finished one, which I'll show how we trim up. And I actually made this one just with a normal ruler. I haven't made that one with the trim tool, so I know it works. So we're going to start with our centre square again. And a lot of what we're going to do is very similar to the trim tool. But it's just, like I say, you need to start with your strips, all of them, background and colour, at 1.5 inch. And we're just going to put pieces on. Let's just grab a couple of pins. I'll probably take that little pile to the, now, let me just choose. Now the one thing I just have to watch here, I think I'll be all right on that one, is you need about 1/2 inch, I would say. I would allow yourself about 1/2 inch, either edge, because we need a bit to trim. Now I think I might just set those aside and go for some bigger pieces so I don't end up not getting a big enough piece. I don't mind winging it a bit at home, but let's do this properly on camera, eh? So I'm going to sew 1/4 inch, and I tend to do work in opposites, 2 at a time. And at home I generally have more than one block, so I can sort of chain piece, leave one under the needle and then be sort of adding fabrics to the next. But here we're just going to do one, and we're just going to do 1/4 inch. Now I would say as well, this needs to be an accurate 1/4 inch. So I can feel I'm almost hitting the head of that pin, so I'm just going to push that pin down and out the way. I'm going to whisk this around and come back the other way. And then while I'm at the machine, I'm going to grab 2 more pieces and add them. Now if you find these bits get in the way, you can trim, and actually I think I will. Now the way to do this with the ruler, I'm going to try with this ruler and see if it makes sense in my head. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. Right. Is the 45-degree line I'm going to put along that stitch line, and then we need to make sure there's a 1/4 inch from the corner there to there. So if I had trimmed that, I would have trimmed off too much. So I'm just going to do that. And this is one of those where it takes my brain a little while to click in to what I need to be looking at on the ruler. So you just have to sort of bear with it a minute. Right, that one I haven't sewn, so I do need to put 2 pieces on. I get used to doing how I do it with the trim tool, which is slightly different. Right, I'm just going to give that a press. Right, so I've got my 45-degree line following that seam, and then I've got 1/4 of an inch from there to there. Let's just... The worst round is the first one. Once you get the first one on, it sort of makes a bit more sense. So 45-degree line along there, 1/4 of an inch between there and there. Let's double check that. Yeah, that's looking okay. 45-degree line. This is not for the angularly challenged. Like I say, once you've done it a couple of times, 1/4 of an inch there to there. I've got one here I'm going to check this against to make sure I've done this right. And 45-degree line there, 1/4 of an inch there. That's my mantra. That should be right. Now, should we get my one out that I've done to check? Yes, it looks the right size. So we can press on. So now we're going to do the colours. So round 2. Let's say it gets easier after the first 2 rounds. Right, let's start with the blue corner. And these go along there. That's not going to be long enough. I think that should be long enough. And we're going to give it a go. And then opposite blue goes green. So let's grab a green. That's definitely long enough. Let's put those on. And then I'm going to grab a yellow and a red in a minute once I've sewn these 2 sides on. Once again, if you wanted to sew it from the other side, you could see where your points are. And if I do it from that side, I'll show you what I mean. So here, right there, let me get a pen and put a dot there. Right there is where our seams cross. So that's going to be the point. So we need to make sure we don't wander off into here, otherwise we'll take the point of that square off. So we're going to see that that needle is going to go hit that red dot. So you may find it easier to sew it from this side. I'm not too worried, to be quite honest, because it's a scrappy block. So see that one I did from the other side and it's come out fine. So as long as you're doing accurate 1/4 of an inch, you shouldn't be too bad. Right, so what goes into there? That goes red. So let's choose a nice long red one. And then yellow. So let's find a nice, actually, let's do a nice bright yellow. Yeah, I'm liking the look of that one. And at home, I have a little surface next to me and I have them all laid out so I can just sort of grab and add strips as I go. So I'm just going to give this a press. Now, once again, just be careful when you're pressing because you are cutting things on a bias again. So we have got bias edges under here. Now, see if my brain has got around this ruler yet. So I'm going to put the 45-degree angle along a seam line so you can see. So that's my 45-degree line and I'm going to put that on that seam there. And then I'm also looking here for my 1/4 of an inch. So I'm measuring a 1/4 of an inch from the corner of that white there out into the coloured pieces of fabric. And then I can trim. Now this gets easier as you put your rounds on. The first round is always the hardest. And it takes a while for my brain to click in. There we are. So 45-degree line there, and I'm going to trim, and I've got my 1/4 inch there. I'm going to trim. That can go back in, and I'm just going to keep going around. And all I'm doing is sort of moving the ruler up and down to get to that 1/4 inch. Once I've hit that 45-degree line along the seam, and then I'm going to make sure I've got 1/4 inch there. Now that bit, that'll be good for a hexagon, but that's going to be too small for any more pineapple blocks. And then 45-degree there. And 1/4 inch right there. Let me bring that down a bit. That might be a little bit out of shot. Hopefully that's a bit better there. There's my 45. I'm just going to manoeuvre until I get my 1/4 inch. And that bit might be a bit small, but that will definitely do for hexagons. So that's our round 2. So now we're back to background. So I should put it under the close-up there so you can see that. Now once you get it to this stage, it becomes a lot easier. So let's get another background row on quickly. And then this time we're just making sure, once again, we want at least a 1/4 inch hang off. I'm probably going to give myself a 1/2 inch. And actually if I snip that in half, or let's rotary cut it, I can use that for 2 sides. So let's go back and sew these again. I forget this has got an automatic presser foot that's buttons, not a lever. Now we're going to take that to the iron, give it a press back again. Now if you want to get rid of some of those longer bits, I find they sort of get in the way, but I'm going to leave them because I don't want to trim off too much. And that's, I always find the first round is the one I have to think about the most. So what I would say, quite often what I do at home is just make that first couple of rounds, just so that you're in the mind of doing those, because once now you get to this point, you can begin to just follow what's already there. So I'm going to line up, that should be 1 1/4 inches because we've just taken a 1/4 inch seam there. So I should now just be able to start trimming these off using that second round, so that's the coloured blue round, as my guide, so I don't have to keep finding the 45-degree and the 1/4 inch. Once we get 2 rounds in, we should just be able to start whizzing. So just keep adding your rounds until you get to the size block you want. Now for mine, I worked out that with those 1.5 inch strips, to get to the 10.5 inch, so 10 inch finished, that I'm using, that I'm doing with my trim tool, it's the same number. So you do 3 rounds of background, 3 rounds of your coloured, and then you add these corner units. Now these are oversized. They need to be at least 2.5 inches by about 4 inches. However, I have found, if you have a look at those, these are offcuts from something else. They're actually more of a half square triangle. That's going to work. So I'm going to keep it like that, so it doesn't have to be a rectangle. I know on the trim tool it says put a 2.5 by 4 inch rectangle on, but because this is scrappy, I'm trying to use up bits that are already in there. So that's going to work. So keep going until you get to this bit. Then just add your 4 large pieces to the corners. Let's say I tend to use 2.5 inches. And then I'm going to come in. Sorry, I think I said I was using 10 inch. I'm using 8 inch, 8.5. The trim tool goes up to 10 inches. And then we are just going to trim. Now I've got a little bit of excess, but that's okay because I can trim it to the size. Now I'm actually going to put it under there because you're not going to get all of this in on the close-up. And the block's too big, right, so 8.5. And I'm actually sort of using my centre square as my centre point. So there's tiny, tiny little pieces coming off. Just making sure I'm square everywhere. And that is, let's clear all of that out the way. Move that out the way. And that's our 8.5 inch pineapple block. So it measures exactly the same as I've been doing with my trim tool. I've stopped after 3 rounds. If I put one more round on, I think that comes up to, well, it'll be 2 rounds, 1 background, 1 colour. That would come up to the 10. I think the trim tool does 6, 8 and 10 inch blocks, and I'm going for the 8 inch. So that's what we've got there. So I can now got a bit more choice actually, because if I'm finding strips that are only 1.5 inches wide, I can be using just a normal ruler to do my blocks, and they're still going to come out the same size as the blocks that I'm doing with my trim tool. But for the trim tool, you need at least 1 3/4 inch strips. Now I found when I was going through my scraps, I was coming across strips that weren't quite 1 3/4, but now I can still use those. So I've got 2 methods where I can make those pineapple blocks. I think with that one now, I started these in January. I'm trying to do a couple each month. I think that's either block 9 or block 10. So I'm doing quite well on my pineapple blocks. And I've got another one started and another centre on the go here as well. So I'm going to try and get those 2 finished, and then that'll be another 3 to add to my growing pile. So I hope you found that useful. Like I said, just take your time with that first one. I mean, if you really mess it up, you haven't messed up much. So just, you know, sort of give that another go. But it's definitely just that trick of finding your 45 degree, giving yourself 1/4 inch for your seam. But once you get past that second round, you're then just squaring up with the block itself. So hopefully for those that either can't get the trim tool or don't have the trim tool, you've got a way now of using your scraps with some lovely, colourful pineapple blocks. So we look forward to seeing your photos of any that you do. Please share them with us on any of our social media platforms. Thank you for joining me again today. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, all those wonderful things that help to support and grow our channel. And thank you for joining me, and I hope you'll join me again here next time in the sewing studio.